my good friends. Greg Koukl here for Stand to Reason, and so glad to be with you today. I feel like I've been running the last few months, and in fact, I got in last night at 8:30 in the morning. I'm sorry, 8:30 in the evening. That was Monday night. I had left on Friday? Yeah, Friday morning at 3:30 a.m. That's the day after Thanksgiving, so I wouldn't have any leftovers, Thanksgiving leftovers, and had a fabulous time with a church in South Florida, a Calvary Chapel down there, just fabulous. 2 services Friday evening, 3 Sunday morning, and then 3 hours in the afternoon, and it was just wonderful. I just got back yesterday, and I'm off this morning to do shows. And I'm driving down to San Diego to spend some time with Mike Horton in his class tomorrow at seminary there. So I just go. And I really look forward to coming back tomorrow night and then kind of resting in the sense of not traveling. I don't know, maybe you guys are feeling it too, just a little bit of stress, although we're getting into that season that is generally stressful. But hopefully for me it'll be a little bit of a slowdown. Looking forward to that. Glad to talk with you today, though, and I was thinking about a challenge I heard online maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. I was just actually watching a couple little clips, and one of Frank Turek doing a university talk, and afterwards he has Q&A, and he deals with all kinds of challenges from the audiences, and Frank is really good at this. In fact, I think he has filled in the last couple of months to help complete the Charlie Kirk tour that Charlie, of course, wasn't able to complete, and answering questions and challenges from the university crowd. And this particular challenge, I just listened to the challenge, and for some reason I didn't go further. Frank's really good about these things, but I wanted to think about the challenge and how I would answer. And I encourage you to be thinking about that if you watch things online where you have these interactions between Christians and challengers. It might be a good idea when you hear the challenge to just put it all on pause and then see what you would say if that were you fielding the challenges, and then find out how whatever Christian you're listening to, Frank or whoever, answered it himself. Now, this particular challenge, though, is one I hear a lot, or some version of this. And the challenge basically said, or the person said, it was in a form of a question, but didn't Jesus teach that we were supposed to love and accept one another? Didn't Jesus teach that we were supposed to love and accept one another? Now, you probably are imagining where this person is going with that. If we say yes, Jesus taught we should love and accept one another, then the question is going to be, why don't you Christians love and accept transgenders, gays, whatever, this group of people who, as Christians, believers have taken moral exception with their behavior. And, of course, a lot depends, and this is probably the first question that I'd ask in response. It depends on what you mean by love, first of all. What do you mean by love? Opening Columbo question. What do you mean by love? Now, I know what they mean. They mean affirm, accept and affirm is what they mean. Tolerance means acceptance. Yeah, it's okay with me, and it's good. It's good for you, at least. Maybe not good for me. I wouldn't do it, but if you do it, that's fine. That's what they're looking for us to say, and they are trying to put that affirmation into the mouth of Jesus. Now, just as a general rule, and when I was with Amy making recordings for STR Ask, hashtag STR Ask this morning, I made this comment. It just seems to me that a lot of people who are raising questions or making claims about Jesus and about his teaching, and this happens a lot, have never read Jesus. And what I mean by read Jesus is they haven't read through the Gospels with a mind to finding out what kinds of things did Jesus teach about himself and about what he came to do, and about how we ought to be behaving. Now, I added that last because there are moral teachings in there about Jesus, but I don't think most of what Jesus came to teach was as how we ought to behave. Well, what about the Sermon on the Mount? Well, there's a lot of behavior stuff in there, but I think it's to a different purpose. Jesus says, look, the scribes and Pharisees, they say don't commit adultery. The law says don't commit adultery. Well, I didn't do that. Did you ever think about it? Yeah, you're going to hell. That's Jesus, right? Don't murder. I didn't murder. Did you ever call your brother an idiot? Well, sure, he is an idiot. Well, then you're going to hell. In other words, Jesus is identifying moral behavior as wrong that is capable of condemning us. He's saying it's not just the actions, but the attitudes that fall under the purview of righteousness or sinfulness. And so there are behavioral things that Jesus addresses throughout the Gospels, but that isn't the reason that he came, and it isn't the substance of his teaching. He does talk a lot about the kingdom and what the kingdom is like, but a lot of it is there's a discovery process regarding the kingdom that he is bringing, and there's a mysterious element to it. In any event, the point is that a lot of people talk about Jesus with some authority, like they know what Jesus was all about, like he's a social justice warrior of some sort. I wrote a whole piece about this called The Legend of the Social Justice Jesus. You can find it on the website. And it is a legend. That isn't what Jesus came to do. It isn't what he said about himself. It isn't what the other authoritative figures like John the Baptist and Zechariah giving a prophecy about John the Baptist, who then gives the prophecy or makes the identification of Jesus as the one that he is crying in the wilderness to present, the one he calls the Lamb of God. When you look at all of those sources of information, you find something entirely different than what many people have in mind about Jesus. And in fact, that's what I did in that particular article, and you're welcome to check it out. But it just underscores more and more that when people give an opinion about what Jesus was all about, and then it's just ill-informed. We had this thing that's actually, it's still going on, I think, but not as big as it was maybe 2 years ago, this He Gets Us campaign. Now, Jesus washed feet. He didn't criticize people. That was kind of one of the messages of the He Gets Us campaign. Jesus washed feet once with disciples the night before he died to make a particular point to the disciples about serving each other. He wasn't a foot washer. He didn't go around the country washing people's feet and not speaking about sin and righteousness and judgment. It's just a mischaracterization of Jesus. So when somebody asks a question like this, well, didn't Jesus advance love and acceptance? And we understand usually what that person is getting at when they ask this question. It's clear to me that they haven't read Jesus. And I decided just last week, actually, and I'm writing a short piece on this. If you receive our material from Stand to Reason, like Solid Ground, or our mentoring letters that I usually write, but sometimes other team members write it. We send it out every month, one or the other, on alternating months. By the way, if you don't get that, just go to str.org, and I think in the upper right-hand corner of the website, it'll say register. Just register. You get behind the registration for that, basically. It doesn't cost anything. And we're going to send you these pieces, and they're great. I mean, if I can say that. I guess I author them most of myself, but I'm not trying to wave my flag. I'm just, people have said these are helpful. Anyway, I'm putting together one of the shorter pieces, a mentoring letter, for next year on this. I'm just going to call it the 5 Loves. Because as I was thinking about the Gospels, and I've been a student of the Gospels for 50 years. I just finishing up the Gospel of Matthew again, and I've read it over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I just keep going through this stuff over and over. It occurs to me that Jesus didn't talk that much about love. I was trying to think, what did Jesus say about love? So I got my concordance out, and yep, sure enough, precious little. It wasn't the main emphasis of his teaching. His main emphasis was not behavior. It was him. It's not about Christians. It's about Christ, who he was and what he came to do. But he did talk about love a few times, famously. And I'm just going to sum them up for you, just so you know, because you might be surprised about this. The principal thing he said about love had nothing to do with each other. The two greatest commandments, they're both love commandments. The first one is love God. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Are you concerned about Jesus' teaching about love? Okay, here's the first thing you do. You love God. Now, if you're trying to confirm or affirm or encourage or find Jesus' support for a behavior that is contrary to what God himself wants, then you're not loving God by advancing that. You are violating love if you do that. So Jesus said, love God. He also said, love your neighbor. Now, the scribe, who thought he was doing pretty good about this, loving God, when he got to loving your neighbor, he wasn't so sure. And so, as a legalist, he asked, okay, who is my neighbor? And this is where we have the parable of the Good Samaritan. Unfortunately, the parable of the Good Samaritan in most Bibles is headed up with a statement at the top, it's separated out, the Good Samaritan. And by starting there at the parable of the Good Samaritan, you miss the point Jesus was making when he gave the parable, because it was in response to this question, who is my neighbor? But there's something else there that it's important you don't miss. Because the what Pharisee, scribe, whoever, the lawyer, was asking that question for a reason. And it says there right in the text, wishing to justify himself. Wishing to justify himself. In other words, he thought, I got the love God thing down, but I'm not sure if I'm loving my neighbor, so who's my neighbor? And if I got that squared away, I'm self-justified. And so Jesus says, okay, here's your neighbor. And he gives the parable of the Good Samaritan. Of course, for a Jew, the Samaritan is one of his biggest enemies. So your neighbor that you're supposed to love is your enemy. And in fact, Jesus also says this, love God, love your neighbor, which may be your enemy, but you're to love your enemies. So I'm not sure if I should count that as 2 loves or 3 loves. But let's just say it, love God, 1. And that means you should be doing what he's saying if you love him. Jesus said, why do you call me Lord, Lord? You don't do as I say. What's up with that? True love has moral dimensions, and God is the one who describes those moral dimensions. Paul says love does not rejoice in unrighteousness. That's 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. Okay, so love God, love your neighbor, and that may entail loving your enemy, and Jesus offers that in a different place. But then he has 2 other commandments that seem to be reserved for his disciples. Now, notice that he's not developing this idea of love very much. It isn't like this is his big thing. He's always talking about it. He's not. You think love is important? Yeah, it is important. Love God. Love your neighbor, which includes your enemies. Now, keep in mind that, and C.S. Lewis makes a good point here, a clarification. Jesus says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So he's giving a little substance there to it. So the question is, how is it that we love ourselves? And Lewis makes the point, we don't always feel good about ourselves. We don't always have good feelings about ourselves. So if we love our neighbor as we love ourselves, then that can't entail having a certain kind of feeling about them, because we don't even have those feelings about ourselves much of the time. So what does it mean to love our neighbor as ourselves? And Lewis points out, well, here's one thing. We pretty much always look after, generally speaking, our own self-interest. We are concerned with our self-interest, what benefits us. Not selfishness, that's not my point, nor his, is that loving ourselves means trying to protect and take care of our needs and satisfy the things that we need. And when Jesus says love the neighbor as yourself, then he means that you should be looking after the best interests of your neighbor, and not just yourself. putting the other one first. Okay? But as I mentioned a few moments ago, love does not, or love has moral dimensions to it. Love isn't encouraging people to do something wrong. That would not be in their best interests. It might be what they want in the moment, but it wouldn't be in their best interests. And so we are to love others in the sense that even our enemies, that we are looking after their best interests. Love God, love your neighbor, including your enemies. Now, two different points of love that Jesus applies to his disciples. And it's interesting that this comes at the end of Jesus' ministry. In fact, it comes the night before he's crucified. It comes in the last of Jesus' great discourses. He had 4 of them. I mentioned the first one, the Sermon on the Mount. Then there's the Bread of Life discourse. Then there's the Olivet discourse, Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13. And then there's the Upper Room discourse, chapter 13 to 17 of John, which is like 1/3 of the whole book. So 1/3 of the Gospel of John is devoted to Jesus' last night with his disciples. And during that time, he says, I am giving you a new commandment. That's interesting, isn't it? Because what he says following that statement is, love one another. Love one another. Now, just before he had washed his disciples' feet, and he said, I'm giving you an example about how you love, essentially. You love by being a servant to each other. You serve each other. Now, I'm not saying that Jesus is necessarily restricting that kind of love to only Christians and not to other people, but this is where it's directed. That certainly is the most important application. Jesus is telling his disciples to love one another. Then the world will know, and I don't know where I'm getting this verse, but I think maybe from the Upper Room Discourse, the world will know that you are my disciples by your love for one another. John picks this up in 1 John. God is love, we're to be loving, and we're to love one another. So this same theme is played out there. But then he adds one other thing regarding love that may catch you by surprise. And I think a lot of people are surprised when I mention this. It's also right there in the Upper Room Discourse. In fact, it's in John 14 and verse 21 and 23. And here Jesus says, watch this, he who has my commandments and keeps them is the one who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and will disclose myself to him. Now, what's unusual about this verse? On the one hand, there's this fairly intuitive statement. If we love Jesus, we're going to do what he says. But notice what he says is going to be the consequence or the result of us obeying Jesus, or I should put it this way, loving Jesus by obeying him. The Father will love you. If you love Jesus, as evidenced by your obedience to him, the Father will love you, and Jesus will love you in return. In other words, and I don't think this is stretching this at all, there is a certain love that the Father has for his own that he does not share with others. Does God love everybody? Sure, after a fashion. God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. Now, the word there for world, by the way, is cosmos, so this is much bigger than just the population. But he is giving his Son as a sacrifice for the entire world that he made, people and the system that's going to be rescued as a result of his Jesus' death and resurrection and coming again to restore all things. But there's another love, though, that's very special that God reserves for those who love Jesus. And other people don't get that, if I'm reading this text correctly. And by the way, just, to underscore the point, 2 verses later, Jesus says kind of the same thing. Verse 23, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word. repetition of verse 21. And my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our abode with him. So in the space of 3 verses, we have Jesus making the same claim twice. That there is a love that the Father gives to us who love Jesus, and we're enjoined to love him by obeying him. And when we love him by obeying him, that is, our obedience is an evidence of our love for him, then the Father bestows upon us a special love, and we are actually drawn closer to Jesus and to the Father in a unique kind of communion that those on the outside do not share. So what do we learn in the Gospels here about what Jesus says about love? He says to love God above all else. And that entails behavior. He says we love our neighbor as ourselves. And even if our neighbor is our enemy, like the Samaritan. And he also says to his disciples, I want you to love one another and serve one another, servant leadership. And then he says, I want you to love me. And you love me by obeying me. And when you love me, I will love you back in a special way because the Father is going to love you, and we're going to love you together in a way that no one else gets loved. So that's Jesus' teaching about love. It's not very complicated, and there's not a whole lot of it, is there? It isn't like he was all about teaching everybody to love and accept each other, especially in the sense that most people mean that when they raise the issue. No, Jesus was about himself, not in a selfish way, but in a way that proclaiming his person and his work to rescue all of those who would come to him by faith. And when we come to him and love him and obey him, then we are loved by him and by the Father. That's pretty good. All right, let's take a break, and I'll come back with your questions when I return on Stand to Reason. All right, we are starting December here, and this is one of the most important months of the year for us at Stand to Reason because this is the time when people usually think, and we're doing the same thing with our family right now, how are we going to accelerate our giving at the end of the year to organizations that are important to us? And I have been so touched. It happens all the time. I'm so thankful when people call in, and you've heard them say this, look, I'm a strategic partner, and I love what I'm doing. I'm thankful that I can give, my wife can, and I can give, our family can give to Stand to Reason because we have benefited so much from you. And that's the equation, I think. That's the calculus. And that is, if you are benefiting from what we're doing, boy, we want to benefit from you. If we're giving to you, which is important to us, that's why we're here. We encourage you to give back to us, especially this time of year. And I want you to see the kind of good that you are going to do for thousands of believers by partnering with Stand to Reason, especially here at the end of the year. We have so many things that we're involved with. STR University, 21,000 learners that are enrolled in our free online courses. We got 169 STR outposts and, 38 different states, 12 different countries, and that's expanding as we're reaching out in this grassroots kind of way to guide local communities of kindred spirits. We have reality student apologetics conferences that you guys know about because we have them, and I've been talking about them. We had a sold-out crowd, 4,100 in Minneapolis. Last I heard, now we have, that's my numbers, almost 1,000 signed up for Dallas on February 20th and 21st. That was a week ago, and I know there's a lot more now. That's almost half full. And I'm sure that we're going to sell out for Dallas in February, sell out for Philly in March 13th and 14th, and SoCal, April 24th and 25th. we always have a great turnout there, so we're likely to sell out for them as well. But I'm just saying, these are the kinds of things that we're doing. Our website, fabulous. We upgraded it a couple of years ago, and I just think it's magnificent, and it's so chock full with things that you can benefit from and learn from and use as Christian ambassadors. All of that is made possible because we have generous people who have been giving to us all year long, but especially this time of year, I want to encourage you to think about sending a gift to Stand to Reason. And, we have a group of dedicated SDR partners that has pledged $375,000 as a challenge gift this month. It's already pledged. It's not a matching gift. They're already going to give it, but they want to challenge you with that. And they want to say, as a group, their challenge is that you will give generously to collectively equal or exceed that gift by the end of this year. And so that's the challenge I'm putting out to you. If Stand to Reason has been helpful to you, or you want to continue to help other people who are benefiting so much from Stand to Reason, please send us a gift. And we will actually have a gift in return for that. And it's a share your story set, because things are really happening right now. We see an openness to the gospel we haven't seen in a long time. Some people are using the word revival. I'm not going to use that word. I will just wait and see. But definitely there's an opening. And you know it. Probably you're encountering people that are showing an interest, so we want to help you to do that. We're there, Stand to Reason, to stand in the gap. We've been prepared by the Lord over these years to meet that need, but we've been preparing you guys to do it as well. And so that's why when you send your gift this month, before the 31st of the month, we're going to send you a copy of the Story of Reality. We're going to send you a bonus quick reference guide for the book Story of Reality that will help you, follow the ideas, keep them firm in your mind so that you can talk with others about it. We're also going to give you 2 copies of the story of why God died and came to life again. Now, this is an excerpt from the Story of Reality that is the gospel portion. All the Jesus stuff is in that booklet there. And we're sending it to you so you can give those little booklets away to other people. All that for your gift to Stand to Reason this month. If you want to have more information about how to give your gift, just go to str.org/donate, or just respond to what we've sent out. I looked in the office today when I came in, and we had packages and packages and packages of that reality giveaway, all of those things that I mentioned. So we can send them out. We're getting checks and requests, starting today. So we're packing them up, shipping them out, and we'll be glad to send that to you to help you as a better ambassador for Christ to meet this harvest that is forming right before our eyes. All right. So let's see. I think we have some callers on board. Let's go to Massachusetts, and this is Paul. Hello, Paul.
Hey, good evening, Greg. How you doing? Thank you for taking my call.
Yes, I'm glad to talk with you, Paul. Appreciate it. Doing great.
Great. Hey, so actually, I'm an outpost director, and I am also a strategic partner.
Oh, good for you. Wow.
Yeah, and a long-time listener, 20-plus years, I think. So
wow.
You've been part of my life for a long time.
Thank you.
Thank you, actually. So my question this evening is, I've been kind of getting into philosophy a lot later, and I know you've got a degree in that.
Yeah.
So I think I'm calling the right person. And I've been thinking...
Maybe. We'll see.
Maybe. I'm trying to figure out if there's an argument for the existence of God based on the fact that numbers exist. Because, numbers obviously aren't material,
right.
But they do exist. And I'm not sure, are they mind-dependent? But obviously, if human beings didn't exist, I think numbers, 2 plus 2 would still equal 4.
Yeah.
But does that then mean that there still has to be an ultimate mind, God, that would make sense of that? I'm not sure if I'm thinking about this correctly. I'm hoping you can clear that up for me.
No, yeah. No, these are good questions, and I'm not sure if I'm the best one to answer, because there is a difference of opinion among philosophers, even Christian philosophers, of whether certain abstract objects even exist. If there is a realist perspective. Now, if numbers were real, then they would be abstract objects and they would be immaterial. So the existence of abstract objects does evident. Is your speakerphone on or something like that? I hear an echo in the background.
No, I'm
Okay,
on regular.
that must be my bad on this side. Anyway, if there are abstract objects, real things that are not physical, then certainly physicalism is shown to be false. Materialism is shown to be false, and regardless of the God question. There is a world of immaterial realities, and so physicalism would be falsified by that. Now, whether those things exist or not, those particular things, numbers, for example, is a matter of debate. And I don't know where I sit on that. I haven't pursued this enough to be able to weigh in. But I think that a person who does not think that numbers exist, but they're just kind of useful fictions. It's kind of like saying, what size is the average family? Well, the average family is like 3.4 kids, right? There isn't a 0.4 kid. 3.4 kids is a number, but it's not a fact. It's a way of talking about it that helps us to understand the family sizes in general, but 3.4 is not a number of kids that actually exist. It's a useful fiction. And many will argue that abstract objects in general, including numbers, are useful fictions. We find ways that they're helpful, but they aren't real. Now, I don't know where I fit on that. And some have said if abstract objects are real, they are not mind independent completely. They are in the mind of God. That's where they exist. And so they're still dependent on God's existence. And an argument might be made for God's existence in that way. I wouldn't make it just because I don't know enough to do that. I'll tell you a similar kind of argument that has been made, and that has to do with mathematics. And it does seem like the mathematical world is real. Now, again, okay, how does that work with numbers about not being real? I don't know. That's another discussion. But I do know that secular scientists, physicists have looked at the world and realized that there's a strange marriage between the world of math, which exists on its own, mathematics exists on its own apart from the mind of man, it seems. Our minds have access to these things, but they also, in a certain sense, imprint themselves on the world. They're united with the world in a certain fashion. The world reflects these mathematical concepts, and that's weird to them. How do they make sense of that? It certainly won't make sense in a purely physicalistic world, but some have ventured arguments for God based on that curious kind of relationship between the world of mathematical factors and also the real world, the world itself that seems to reflect these mathematical relationships. So that would be, I think, the more productive way of going about trying to address this. Use numbers, use math, or whatever to argue for the existence of God. That's the way I would go. But I don't know enough to make that case. I just know that there's discussions about it.
Yeah. Actually, you made a nice distinction that I hadn't really thought about, and that is the difference between numbers and mathematics. I guess for some reason I was thinking about it all as one thing. And the point that I was going to bring up, which you actually brought up, was the fact that mathematics can describe like everything that exists. And why is that? Why does it describe the physical universe? Even though it's not physical, it's just that is a little bit mind blowing,
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the guy. I can't recall his name right now, but he was the guy who worked with Stephen Hawking on the equations that resulted in a Big Bang, the standard Big Bang model. And I listened to an interview that he had once, and again I can't remember his name, but he's well known, obviously, in the field, and this was his reflection. He said, what's amazing is that there is this whole world of immaterial realities called math that exists, And what's also amazing is that it's somehow imprinted on the physical world. And this is why they can do differential calculus or the physics equations that have to do that have to do with gravity and all that other stuff. I'm not clever in that at all. I've been listening to Stephen Meyer recently, some of his podcasts, and he's got it all down, But I listen a bunch of times, I still don't get all of it. But there is these equations that do tell us about what the world is like, and you can work with the equations by working the equations out in a particular way. And this is what Einstein did. This is what Hawking did. And when you do that, then it tells you more about how the real world is actually functioning and how space is curved and all of that other stuff. So there is that connection, and it's really odd, and it defies, I think, a physicalist explanation, principally because math, equations, seem to reflect real things, but they're not physical. So therefore, physicalism is refuted.
Okay, all right. Well, maybe I'll have to see if I can hunt down who this other mathematician was that you were talking about.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. I'm not sure, but the person he worked with, very well known, so you can find that out. And then see what he has to say. This stuff is easy to Google nowadays, or ChatGPT or whatever, So I'll do your best.
Gotcha.
All righty.
Okay.
All right.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
I appreciate your call. All right, let's take a break, and more calls coming up. All right, let's get back to calls here, and we have an anonymous caller. I'm glad you called, Anonymous. You know what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to think of a kind of a standard name I can use for anonymous callers. Any suggestions? How about Fred? Can I call you Fred?
Sure.
I don't know why I think of Fred, but Fred it'll be. Maybe Fred and Mary for a female. You'll be Fred. You don't want to be Mary, do you?
No,
Okay.
Fred is good.
Okay, Fred. What's up? What's on your mind?
I'd like your thoughts about using someone's suffering as an apologetic, kind of like God did with Israel in the book of Judges. He was calling them back to himself.
Uh-huh.
So my wife has had what I would call 5 life sentences: diabetes, chronic kidney disease,
Wow.
heart condition that leads to shortness of breath. She's a breast cancer survivor, but she's anxious that it'll return.
Uh-huh.
And then a diseased colon that required its removal and a permanent ostomy bag.
Oh.
So meanwhile, I count 10 blessings, and this is just like out of John 14:21. I feel like I'm obeying the Lord more than I have in my life. I'm 5 years behind you. I'm 70. These like 10 blessings in the last 4 years that I had no part in initiating.
Yeah.
They were all unexpected. I felt totally blessed. I feel totally blessed.
So just so I'm clear, though, what you've described to me are circumstances that your wife has experienced that has brought her suffering. Is that right? Not you. I mean, maybe indirectly to you, obviously, but
yes.
These have strengthened your own convictions with Christ. Is that right? Your own relationship with Him.
No. My own walk has done that. But I mean, meanwhile, I'm witnessing her going through this terrible suffering.
So how is she doing? Is she a Christian?
I thought she was, but I don't see the fruit.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So I guess I'm a little confused about the question here regarding suffering.
Well, I mean, I feel like the believing husband in 1 Corinthians 7:14 that she is sanctified through me.
Huh.
And
okay.
And I haven't said it, but I feel like I want to compare our two lives. But the last thing, the ostomy bag, was only last January, and so I feel like since then she's really gone through hell. And so, I feel like I want to grieve with those who grieve. But on the other hand, she's 72, and I'm feeling an urgency, lest something worse happens. And so,
right. Well,
I want to
go ahead. Sorry.
So that's where I am. I want to, I've just tried agape, and
right.
we have peace and respect between us. We've been married 46 years, but
wow.
Yeah.
So okay, let me offer some thoughts here, and I'm not sure if it's going to be helpful to you, but I mean, it's clear to me that for your part, whatever difficulty or hardship that has come upon you through the sufferings of your wife, you have been responding in a godly fashion that is deeply satisfying to you and drawing you closer to the Lord. Is that fair so far? Okay, yeah.
Yes.
And in her case, she's the one directly experiencing the suffering. That hasn't been the case for her. And oftentimes it's the suffering that other people go through that critics cite as evidence that God does not exist. Now, I never quite really understood that argument. I know the point they're making, but how is it that if somebody's going to point out suffering as a problem, and now I'm speaking a little bit more in an abstract sense here, Fred, but if they're going to point out suffering as a problem, if the suffering does not have a moral element to it, in other words, if it's not like morally questionable that there's suffering in the world, then how is it evidence against God? I don't get it. If it is morally questionable, that means there's an objective morality, which is evidence for God, not against God. So I don't think that argument comes together. The irony, though, is when it comes to Christians, their suffering turns out to draw them closer to God, usually, not away. And I think if people fall away and because of suffering, I think this is evidence that they have no root. Jesus talked about that, in the parable of the sower, and so maybe with regards to your wife, I don't know what to say. I think you're on the right course. You are showing her goodness and kindness and faithfulness and all of those things that are appropriate for a husband, and long-suffering yourself through her condition. But at the same time, what's going on through her mind? Now, if she is not solid with the Lord, then this suffering is not going to do her any good. The promise regarding the benefit of hard things, Romans chapter 8, is a promise not for people, but for believers.
Right.
We know that God causes, all of these kind of verbs are important here. We know that God causes all things to work together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. For those whom he foreknew, he preordained to be conformed to the image of his Son. Now, the point here is that the way that God is working it for good in the life of the Christian is the way you described what's happening in your life. He's making you more like Christ through the sufferings you're experiencing as you're part of this relationship. But I don't know what's going on with your wife. And I don't know if just explaining some of that to her, that if, God can definitely use this for her if she turns to him and surrenders herself to him. It's such an awkward circumstance in a way because you're not sure, and it's understandable when people are going through a lot of hardship and difficulty to say, where is God? And this is why there are a lot of verses that are meant to encourage us in the midst of those circumstances, like Romans 8. Paul says in Romans 8, he said, I do not compare this. I think the sufferings of this life have no comparison to the glories that are to follow. He tells the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 4, 17 or whatever, that all the affliction we are experiencing, which he calls momentary and light compared to eternity, is producing for us an eternal weight of glory. So it's not unusual for Christians to start feeling a little bit stymied or confused or frustrated or alone, certainly anguished, when they're in the midst of all this stuff. That's why Paul is encouraging us in other passages too to keep in mind that God is using this for something good in our life, and maybe that's the thing to encourage her with at this point. I don't know how it can be actually an apologetic, an evidence that God is there, that someone's suffering, because lots of people suffer on their own without God, and no good comes from it.
Well, I was kind of thinking, so she thinks, or she might claim that she's a Christian, but I don't see the fruit.
Yeah, I get it.
So what I was saying was, as an apologetic, is okay, look at your life, look at my life, and I feel like there's blessings along the lines of the believing husband sanctifying his that along that, and like you just said in John 14:21, I feel the love of the Father in Jesus. I mean,
right.
Holy Toledo.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that, because sometimes hard circumstances like this can shipwreck some people's faith because it's just hard and they're not seeing it in the right way. And I am glad to hear that that the Lord is bearing fruit through you through this hardship. I just don't know what to say about your wife, and I actually think this is one of the most difficult kind of circumstances, to work with a person who thinks they are Christian, but they may not be, in fact. And and the reason that you raised the question is just there's just something not right. It's just there's no life there. There's words, but no life. How about that? Yeah. So that's the best I can do for you right now, Fred. And I'm glad you called. But
thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. You're welcome. I hope I offered something that's useful. God keep you. All right.
Yeah, you did.
All right. Thank you.
You did.
All right. Good. Bye. Oh, that's a tough one. All right. Let's go to Sarah in Ohio. Sarah, you have a name. Hi.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. I'm calling. So I just started listening to your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Heard about you through several people like Melissa Doherty and Elisa Childers.
Oh, no kidding. Good. That's great.
And so I like to go back to the beginning episodes when I start a new podcast. And I did hear that you have a charismatic background. Is that right? And you're continuing.
Well, yeah, very mildly. I mean, like I became a Christian during the Jesus movement. It just almost felt like everybody who became a Christian then had some kind of charismania going on for them.
Yeah.
But that was before. That was just part of the cultural element of the Jesus movement. Calvary Chapel was a huge mega center for the Jesus movement, and they were mildly charismatic. Hope Chapel, which is very similar to Calvary, was the church I was going to in Hermosa Beach, Southern California, and they came out. They were Foursquare Church, and so that's kind of a Pentecostal charismatic denomination, but there was still, it wasn't like, there's all kinds of speaking in tongues and prophecy and all of that manifestation, but there was a lot of exuberance, and that was kind of fun. Yeah. So, yes. So the answer is that with that qualification, yes.
Right. Well, I guess the reason I was encouraged to come with this question, so I'm still a continuationist myself, and my husband and I are, but we kind of have come out of what we call the hyper-charismatic word of faith, prosperity gospel.
Right. Well, I'm glad you came out of that.
Yes, and I guess the reason I'm calling is I still have family members who I deeply, deeply love. Yeah. Who are in that movement, and I've listened to a lot of people kind of refuting, a lot of the things that are in that movement. We've kind of been on a several years journey. We started digging into Scripture and realizing a lot of things were not being taught correctly. And but a lot of people that I've listened to who kind of refute some of the beliefs there tend to have a very harsh. And they also tend to be a little more Calvinist. Yeah. I kind of wanted to get the perspective of somebody who maybe isn't a cessationist. I guess I'm a little concerned. Are they saved? I truly believe they love the Lord. When I my husband and I last week kind of went through the Nicene Creed, and we're like, well, technically they hold all these views. You know?
Sure. Well, that's helpful. I mean, what you're doing is applying an objective kind of test. But let me ask you this question. I do know the critics of the Word Faith movement are very aggressive, and I understand that, and I think that's appropriate given the movement taken as a whole. There's a lot of weird things and a lot of destructive things going on, and there's a false gospel that is being communicated there. Now, however, you came out of that movement. You walked away from the movement because of your study of God's Word. You realized a lot of things that ain't right. Would you have considered yourself genuine Christians even though you were deceived, misled by Word Faith teaching?
I mean, I think so. I know I deeply loved the Lord. It just took me till adulthood because I grew up in the movement, and you don't usually think to question those you look up to, you know?
Yeah, I understand.
And so it wasn't until adulthood, my husband and I honestly really, and we've often talked that, you know, the Lord almost orchestrated circumstances to kind of force us to start questioning some things.
Right. Well, the reason I asked, I'm cutting you a little short because I only have about 2.5 more minutes here. So before we turn into a pumpkin, the reason I asked this is that by your own testimony, you knew enough about the Lord and trusted in the Lord to be regenerate, to be saved, even though there are other areas of your life you're really being misled about, distracted by, and then you corrected them. I can see that, and my sense is that not that everybody, but there can be many people in the Word of Faith movement who have an accurate understanding of who Jesus is, the incarnate Son of God, and fully God, fully man. And at the same time understand why Jesus came. Principally to save us from sin, and trusting in Him saves us from judgment. Now, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's thrown in there, the name it and claim it, and all of that stuff. The prosperity gospel. That's not sound. All right, but that can be added into a sound foundation and be distracting from your spiritual growth. But at the same time, the foundation is there. Now, I think there are a lot of people in the Word of Faith movement that they have no foundation. They're in it for the money, and I think a lot of the leaders are like that as well. And they're dangerous. Benny Hinn comes immediately to mind. Yes. And Benny Hinn's his son-in-law or something, or maybe his cousin or somebody.
You may be thinking of his nephew,
nephew, and he's become public and explaining the deception and whatever. But it ought to be obvious to most biblically informed Christians that this guy's off the reservation. But so to answer your question, do I think that people in the Word of Faith movement are saved? It depends on what they think and believe about Jesus and who He was and what He did. It isn't just measured by their Word of Faith convictions. If it turns out that there's nothing else there about Jesus, about who He was and what He did, that's in their foundation, and it's all about them, well, I suspect they're not really Christians. Anyway, there you go. Sarah, here's my music, so it's my time to move ahead. Thank you so much for your call. Hope that helps. Greg Koukl here for Stand to Reason. Give them heaven, friends. Bye-bye now.